Let's explore the language, the meaning, the direction. All paths lead there. All thoughts, all beliefs, all paths lead there. And the first thing we need to do is acknowledge the inaccuracy of all language. Everything starts with the one. Each cult divides the one into different pieces and then gives a symbol in sound, it's called language, to delineate. This is a hand, this is a this. And then a sentence is a sequence of symbols, a sequence of sounds that is intended to convey a direction, an idea, a pattern of energy. And all patterns, all symbols are ultimately false symbols because the symbol isn't the underlying reality. So we say, is it true that Joe ate a sandwich? Well, it's ultimately delusionary in the sense that the word sandwich isn't actually the tastes, the sensations of sandwich, right? So it's a metaphor. It's also false in the sense that we're talking about the past. You know, Joe isn't eating a sandwich right now. So we have an idea, we have a memory. And the memory is the new symbol, right? The sensation is the symbol because the sensation isn't the sandwich either, right? So the I am, that's questionable. Eating, chomping, on, I'm not really on it, or a sandwich, right? And a sandwich is a crude symbol for all that energy that's going on there. I am eating a sandwich. But of course, in another language, it's different. It's incomplete as a symbol. Is it a toasted sandwich? Is it a quinoa sandwich? Does it have avocado? You know, we can get more detail, but then is the avocado a millimeter thick? So I am eating a sandwich. Joe is eating a sandwich. Is that really Joe? You know, what is Joe, right? So it's a little bit shaky. Then it references a sensation. But is the sensation the sandwich, right? We have a sensation, there's a pressure here. We have a sensation, there's some stimuli in the sensation of the thing called tongue in our language. But is that what that is? Or is the sensation a symbol? In the same way that we say sandwich and we think a sandwich is real, but it isn't. It's a symbol. It's a sound. It conjures an idea of a sandwich, and we think the idea is real, but it isn't. It's a symbol for a sensation, and we think the sensation is real, but is it, right? Is the sensation real? And if you remove the nerve to the tongue and no longer have the sensation, if you remove the nerve to the eye and no longer have the image, if you remove the nerve to the nose and can no longer smell, is it still a sandwich? And if we put on other senses, right? Because we just have 5, but what about a nail? What if we added the sense of nail? Because nail is the sense of a right angle. And the sense of nail allows us to count right angles. Are they really right angles, right? Or are there vibrating electrons that are kind of very roughly in the direction of a right angle, so it's a useful symbol, right? So that's the abstract meaning, but looking at truths more specifically, well, I was struck listening to Eckhart Tolle talk about the fact that everyone is suffering. So that's a belief for a series of sensations, right? It's a belief that correlates to a series of sensations that we call suffering. Everyone is suffering. Everyone is always suffering, right? The human life is a precarious condition for plants, for animals, for humans. From the moment it begins, a plant is fragile. It could be eaten, it could be stepped on, it could be picked. And in Eckhart's, this particular interview, right, his thought, his idea is that everything is suffering from the moment that it is born, right? From the moment it exists, it's fragile, it's vulnerable, it's suffering in its form. And that there's a pain body that's the kind of collective energy field of all that suffering. Now, suffering is also a sound, it's a symbol, right? It's not suffering. I say suffering, suffer wrong, sufferting, right? So it's a symbol, it's a sound that is a symbol for what? Sensation that we don't want, right? It's not suffering to go on a roller coaster ride if we want to feel whipped around. But is it suffering to put someone who doesn't want to go on a roller coaster, right? In BDSM, it's not suffering to pour hot wax on someone and ice cubes and hot water and whip them, right? But to take someone who doesn't want hot wax, ice cubes, to be whipped, to, bind them up with rope and put ice on them, well, that's suffering, right? So suffering is stimulation that you don't want. So if I don't like the fact that you left the toothpaste cap off, then I'm suffering because you created a stimuli, right? I just look over there and there's a stimuli, there's a cap off. I have to squeeze a bit of that hardened toothpaste off. Just squeeze it off, and that's a sensation I don't like. I look over there, I want to see the cap on, and I want to feel soft toothpaste easily coming out. But instead, I see the cap is off, and I feel there's a hardened bit of toothpaste, and I want clean hands. But I have to take that bit of toothpaste and throw it away. Right? The outrage of that stimulation, right? I didn't want to see that, and I didn't want to feel that. I'm suffering because you left the toothpaste off. Or I'm excited, right? This buried treasure, right? It's a lot more energy, a lot more stimulation. We're going out treasure hunting, right? I have to dig this hole and do this and, go with the metal detector and discover what this is. But this isn't suffering. It's stimulation that I don't want to dig the hole. well, then it's suffering. I want to dig the hole. Well, it's the same sensation. So suffering is sensation that we are feeling that we don't want to feel. So one way of getting rid of suffering is to want or to be open to all the sensations that there is. Right? Another way to get rid of suffering is to pick a particular person, because, as I say, one person wants to go on the roller coaster, and one person wants to have hot wax put on them, and one person hates hot wax, and one person hates motion sickness, right? So one way to end suffering is to accept all of the stimulation that is. And another way of ending suffering is to take a particular person and ask them, they like this, they don't like that, they like this, they don't like that, to create a map of what they like, what they want, and then to curate sensation to order. I like mussels, boiled mussels with butter. I hate that. I'm a vegetarian, So you give the one person sensation mussels with butter, you give the other person carrots, and then you have no suffering, right? So you have two paths to ending suffering. Now, Eckhart has also said on a variety of occasions that suffering is useful because without suffering, you don't wake up, right? So this gets back to the idea that if you want something, it's not bad or suffering. If you don't want it, like if you want to wake up and you believe that suffering will help you wake up, then suffering is great. Bring it on. Let's wear hair shirts, right? Let's crawl up on our knees, right? To suffer more. We could just walk up and wear cotton shirts, but no, we want to suffer for our spirituality, right? Some more whip me, deprive me of this, insult me, right? Make me feel small and lowly before the Lord, right? Somewhat of a projection of the more sociopathic elements of human authority. 1,000 years ago, the lord of the city, the feudal lord, the one in charge, all must bow before the king, right? It was a king usually, and so in a chauvinistic culture, all must bow before the king. Women have to do what they're told. If they don't want to do what they're told, then they're suffering. But if they want to do what they're told, then they're not suffering. They're just doing what they're told, right? And so, bow before the Lord, kneel, say, sir, do this, do that. Apologize for existing, right? You didn't kill the dragon that was 10 times your size. Apologize for being a wretch. You didn't find my daughter. Why should I go look for my daughter? All of you, right? My daughter ran away because I'm such an incompetent parent, because she wanted this and didn't do that. So everyone's going to go on a quest. And if you find my daughter, you can have half of the kingdom. You can get a reward. But if you don't, we'll kill you, right? So, if you kind of project that type of subservient energy onto a larger deity, then, since God doesn't seem to be whipping you and, shouting at you out of the sky, you just, go to various altars and crawl up on hands and knees and bloody yourself and whip yourself and wear shirts that are uncomfortable, all out of an effort to transpose the typically subservient, miserable experience of a lord and a servant onto a larger deity, right? So you have that pattern of energy. But then you have the idea of sleep, right? If you're sleeping peacefully, well, then you don't wake up. But if someone throws a bucket of cold water on you, then you wake up. And so now you're waking up, right? And so if you decide that waking up is a good idea, you're awakened, you're enlightened, right? If your eyes are closed, you're not enlightened, but if your eyes are open, which you have to wake up, well, now you're in a better place. And so that person putting the ice bucket on you while you were trying to sleep is doing you a favor, right? But then if you talk with the health, with the health nuts that are out trying to live longer and well, then you need 8 hours of sleep, and that person has committed a crime, right? They haven't helped you become enlightened. They've deprived you of years of your life if you would have gotten good sleep, 8 hours every night undisturbed and all that. Cool darkness, right? But I'm particularly struck between the focus on pain as a stimuli and as a stimuli for spiritual development, and from Eckhart Tolle and the channel Lazarus. So having spent time with both of them, I would represent the general gist of what Lazarus is saying, and this relates, I think, to a large swath of channeled information, which is that you can learn from pain and you can learn from fear, but you can also learn from joy, from love, from ease. You can learn from struggle, but you can also learn from ease. So Eckhart, I think, would be more in you can learn from pain, but you cannot wake up with ease. Lazarus, that's been the map of the past, waking up with struggle and suffering, but now you've reached a point you can wake up with joy, with ease. Now, it's also interesting that the purpose of waking up, the purpose why people want to be enlightened or to wake up, is to feel better, right? That is an innate human drive. Every human being in the history of humanity wants to feel sustainably better, right? Those people wearing hair shirts to make sure they suffer more now to show their loyalty, well, they're interested in sustainability, because once they show that they suffered more for the Lord, right? And so this is a common template. If you're a business owner, if I'm a business owner, right? And I have 100 employees, and there's a recession, and now I only need 50 employees. Well, I'm going to let 50% of the employees go, right? That's the sociopathic ethic of capitalism, right? So that I still have enough as the company owner and don't go bankrupt. In the middle of a recession, I will lay off half of my employees who are paid less, who are closer in statistical terms to hand to mouth, so that I, who maybe have a year's or a couple years worth of buffer, don't eat into my buffer and don't have to pay people to sit around, right? Because that affects me, right? And in a scarcity mentality, Everyone is focused on themselves, right? My worth is going down because these 50 employees are sitting around. So if I have to decide which 50 employees I'm going to keep and which I'm going to leave, and 50 of the employees stayed and worked late, meaning they suffered more. They stayed and worked late. They worked on a holiday sometimes because it needed to be done, right? There was an irrigation leak, street was flooding. I called, we need to fix this leak. 50 of them went out and worked on their holiday. And the other 50 said, no, it's a vacation. We'll stop the flooding on next Monday, or on the next day, right? So these employees suffered more for the company, right? So that's the perspective of someone who's walking up the stone steps, right? I'm going to walk 1,000 steps up the altar on my knees, on my elbows, right? So that they're bloodied, right? Because, the suffering puts you into the camp that's going to be retained, right? So that when God culls the humanity, humanity in twain, when God evaluates his children, the bad ones are going to, be cast out of the family, are going to burn. While the good ones, they're going to be at the right hand, right? The good ones are not going to be unemployed because they were willing to suffer, right? When the boss needed something to be done, they were there, right? And so now he's going to be there when they're suffering, when they, and this all-powerful framework. So you have that kind of bit of psychology being transposed onto an ultimate deity, right? God's a boss who wants people willing to suffer and do what they're told. And so these people did what they were told and were willing to suffer. And these people, they didn't read the book of the Lord, right? That's the employee manual, right? These people, they didn't wear the face masks. They didn't follow procedure. They left the tools out to rust. Policy is right here, right? Don't leave the tools out to rust. Look at them. They're just sitting there, right? You couldn't move them into the van? No. So you're going to hell, right? You're going to be unemployed when the recession hits, right? Good, I can get rid of all those layabouts that, don't put the tools away, that refuse to be even mildly inconvenienced, for the good of the customer, for the greater good, right? And so that psychology makes sense, meaning it's how we behave, right? You take 1,000 business owners and you give them each 100 employees, and 50 of those employees follow the user's manual, make money for the customer, make money for the business owner, do the thing right, don't get into accidents. They follow the rules, and the rules result in success, or at least they result in the boss feeling important, right? And then, the recession hits, the industry lays off workers, imported steel, closes the steel mill. And who's going to be remaining, right? Just the best of the best. And so I want to be at the right hand of God. I want to be the necessary. So I'm going to suffer more than, they're going to church once a month. I'm going to church once a week. Well, you're going to church once a week. I'm going to go to church twice a day, right? Well, we're Muslims. We're going to pray 5 times a day. I guess we can't beat that, right? 5 times a day. This a day, this on this and this and this. And that's devotion, right? That's loyalty to something, right? To the figurehead of, you followed the plan. And of course you have corrupt bosses and stuff that they worked loyally for 30 years And then they just sent the work overseas to save $2 an hour. Right? What? Right? And this is the wake-up point. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I've been serving this country I've suffered. I worked my weekend, and you just sent it to China for $2 an hour savings? And now they're suffering from you until you send it to Bangladesh, right? And like it's an outrage. It's an outrage because it's broken the contract. I was willing to suffer more than I had to. I volunteered, and you betrayed me, right? That's what scarcity does, right? That's what narcissism, that's what scarcity, that's what sociopathic psychological states do, right? You do all this for me, thank you, and now I'm going to do more for me because all I care about is me, right? So hopefully God isn't sociopathic, right? Hopefully God isn't too narcissistic. Though you have to wonder, right? Leaving his children to wander around looking for a home. The promised these were these were the good people, right? Can you imagine going on a house search for 40 years in a desert? Those were the good people, right? And so you have to hope that God isn't too sociopathic or absent-minded. Oh, in my time, 40 years, a blink of an eye, I just had a little nap, right? Oh, you're still wandering around the desert here. Settle here with a bunch of other people that also think this is their promised land, and then you can have a few thousand years of war, right? Because, after all, you're my children, and we have to see who will suffer the most. So, there's that thread, and Eckhart Tolle is focusing on mindfulness and transcending thought, to rising above thought into a state of presence, and not feeding the pain body and all of that stuff. Now, Lazarus isn't focusing on rising above thought. Lazarus is focusing on changing thoughts. Lazarus is focusing on changing one thing into another. You take an old image and you turn it into a new self-image. You take an old belief that isn't working as well. It used to work somewhat, but not working as well. There's a new model of belief out there. Change it to the new model. And Lazarus is saying, you can have it all, right? Eckhart Tolle is saying there's going to be suffering from the day that you're born, and, the noble truths in Buddhism, to accept all things suffer. And then you have compassion, right? Because you cannot have compassion for suffering without suffering, right? So it makes sense that in Buddhism, I think it's the first noble truth, but certainly one of the tenets is everyone suffers. Life is suffering, right? Now when you understand that life is suffering, that you're suffering, that your parents are suffering, that your children are suffering, then you have a foundation, you have a springboard to go to respond to that, right? Once you understand people are feeling something they don't want to feel, and that everyone's feeling that to some degree, and that's part of what life is. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, right? Because in the New Age, right, in the attitude of gratitude, right, if you're suffering, it's probably because you're defective. We're not going to mention it because that would be judgmental, right? And I wouldn't want to be judgmental. But you did get fired. You're now homeless. You're not feeling very cheerful, right? Now that you're homeless, I call you up, you're not enjoying it. Mm-hmm. You weren't grateful enough, right? You should be grateful that you're homeless. How about that, right? I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. We all know that thoughts create your reality. And now that you're homeless, first of all, what thoughts created that, right? And why do it when you don't have to suffer? Like, I'm not going to be compassionate to this person. They've set out, right? They've set out. They used the wrong belief. They didn't do it my way, right? I'm still employed, right? For now, right? I'm still employed and this and that. And they didn't do it the right way. They did it wrong. Now they're suffering. Now I have to listen to this person suffer when if they would just change their thoughts, they would be successfully employed, wouldn't be homeless, and would be happy. Oh, my goodness. Why won't they change their thoughts? Oh, I can't listen to this. I can't. Goodbye. Call me when you're not homeless, right? So in that whole school, failure is a crime. Pain is a sin. Sin. To miss the mark, to aim at something and miss, that's what failure is. You didn't aim to be on the street. That means you failed. You missed. I didn't miss, right? I didn't miss. I create my reality. You create your reality. You missed the mark. You failed. I don't want to be around that. That's infectious, right? You have to pick the 5 people closest to you that are going to inspire you, that your success is going to be. I can't have you be one of my 5 people living homeless on the street. I don't want to end up like you. You failed. You sinned. You missed the mark. You aimed to get a raise, but instead you got fired. You aimed to stay in your house, but instead you got evicted. You aimed to be healthy, but once you were on the street, you caught a cold. And without being able to treat that cold on the street, you then caught pneumonia, right? And then you went to the hospital where you caught a staph infection. You're really failing. You're missing the mark. Everything you try to do, it's ending up wrong. I want nothing to do with you. I've got to be around winning people. They're going to help me climb they're fit. They have money. They drive expensive cars. Their house is getting bigger every year. That's the person I want to be. I'm hitting the mark. More of this, more of that, more of that. Or at least I'm enjoying my life. Why are you so negative? First you got fired, then you lost your home, then your partner left you. Now your kids are embarrassed about you. Then you got sick and nobody gave you a safe, warm place to sleep. And then you went to the hospital and you got more sick. Why aren't you enjoying your life, right? If you would just have an attitude of gratitude, none of this would have happened. None of it. It's just so simple, right? It's so simple. That's why I've got to hang up the phone right now. So there's no compassion. There's criticism. There's judgment. You failed. You lost, right? But all life is suffering. All people suffer. And compassion is the tenderness we feel towards that suffering. That it's not your fault that you suffered, right? So we have different threads here, right? And you have Lazarus saying you can learn from suffering, but you can also learn from success, right? You can also learn from joy, right? You can learn from pain, but you can learn from love and joy. Why keep learning from pain when you could be learning from love and joy? So it's a little bit more of that criticism, right? Well, since you're suffering on the street, you might as well learn something, but why don't you instead, stop punishing yourself, stop holding on to those beliefs. And it's easier to succeed than it is to fail, is another tenet from Lazarus. So if you're failing, when you could be easily succeeding, maybe there's something wrong with you, right? After all, if it's easier to succeed than to fail, that's one of Lazarus's core statements. It's easier to succeed than it is to fail, and you create your own reality. Why all the failure? What's wrong with you that you want to have all that pain and suffering? And since you want it, let's just let you have it, right? Okay, you wanted pain and suffering. I don't want to, and I don't want to help you because I wouldn't want to disturb your freedom to have pain and suffering, right? I'm going to focus on this and that and do what I can to get to the top in the pyramid, right? And leave the people in pain behind, right? And of course, in the inner and outer reflections of reality, maybe my inner child at 5 years old is in pain, and my 12-year-old is indignant and feels wronged, and my 13-year-old is confused about sexuality and all that. But I don't want to talk and spend any time with my inner children, right? I want to spend time with sophisticated people. I want to ignore. And I don't want my inner children to ruin my image among smart and sophisticated people. And so when they come up and when they have something they have to say, I tell them to shut up and go away and stop ruining, right? Since they want to be immature and wrong. So I don't want the parts of me inside to come up, right? And disturb my successful life, right? So keep in mind that all of this is language, right? All of the pictures you just witnessed and all of your reactions to those pictures based on other pictures, none of them are real. Words are not real. They're symbols for reality. But the symbol isn't, it's a symbol within a symbol within a symbol, right? Plato's great discovery was that the physical world is a shadow world that is a symbol for the more real world. That's also consistent with Lazarus, right? A shadow world, right? That light hits the real object and leaves a shape, an outline on the wall of physical form. That everything that we think of as real are but the shadows of real things in the transcendent world, in the other world, right? That we are calling waking consciousness what would be called from that perspective shadows of reality. Shadows within shadows within shadows within shadows. You see, because when I say Eckhart Tolle, that's not Eckhart Tolle, right? So the sounds are not real. They're not Eckhart Tolle. But neither is the image real, right? The fact that you know who Eckhart Tolle is and have an image of Eckhart Tolle, and I have an image of Eckhart Tolle, doesn't mean the image is real, right? We're not talking about Eckhart Tolle. We're talking about our image. That's another symbol. So the sound is a symbol for another symbol. And then the Eckhart Tolle, right, if we actually go to Eckhart Tolle, right, and find him, right, then the Eckhart Tolle that I was talking about was in the past. That was the video when he was younger, right? I know that because his face was less wrinkled. You know, I'm talking about the Eckhart Tolle of 20 years ago. But you may be thinking of the Eckhart Tolle more recently, right? So if we actually go to that and I play the video for Eckhart Tolle and I say this and this, Well, he may have a different point of view. Well, then is the video real? Because the video is a symbol, right, of another symbol of the past. And that's what a memory is. And so if Eckhart remembers and says, well, I do kind of remember that video. I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but my views have evolved. Well, a view is a symbol of sensation, right? Perspective. So how much is any of this real? Well, that's enough on the reality piece, but I do find it interesting. We're all pursuing sustainable well-being. We're all seeking to minimize chronic and unnecessary suffering. And yet without suffering, there can be no compassion. Without the experience of suffering, there can be no empathy. You know, if I've never had even the concept of pain and I see someone writhing in agony, I might look at them like an interesting animal. Oh, what's all that sound? You said, you shook your hands like this and your eyes were wide. Is this a pantomime? What is it? Oh, you know, but if I see them holding an electrical cord and I've felt pain myself, then I say, oh, they're being electrocuted. And if I'm empathic rather than sociopathic, if I'm sociopathic, I say, oh, this is wonderful. It doesn't concern me, and I'll just step around or I will enjoy their suffering. But if I'm empathic and I say, oh, I don't want them to suffer, well, then I have to do something quickly, right? They're in pain, right? But empathy is then only possible if I've been able to feel a similar type of pain myself to be able to understand it, right? You know, if you think someone's doing an odd dance holding two cables, maybe you just start, you know, jiving in, you know, dance with the cables. Where's my cables? We'll dance together, right? They say, oh, help! What do you need help with? This is a great dance, right? There's no empathy if there's no understanding of pain. There's no understanding of pain if there's no experience of pain, right? But the pain was in the past. We experienced that pain in the past. We have a memory that leads to empathy. And you have all the focus on time, you know. Time is an illusion. What about memory, right? Can you have empathy without time, right? If you don't have a memory of being in pain and dancing, you know, and shaking with electrical, or watching a video and being told that person is in pain, they're being electrocuted. That's what that is. And it's very unpleasant. If you don't have that memory of a moment in the past, can you have empathy in the present? Right? Can you empathize with something you have no concept of? Right? How? How do you empathize? So if empathy depends on the past, memory, etc., you know, how does that tie into being present in the now, right? If saying, I love you, right, requires us to have language, symbols, to put on things, and we learned those symbols in the past, if we're in the present, totally, how can we speak, right? In the innocence of the moment without any language, right? How do we be with that? Now, I believe that any path, anything that we pursue with the goal, with the ultimate goal that every human being has, to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse, that every single thing that we pursue will lead ultimately to its transcendence. And what I mean by that is if we pursue something far enough and long enough, the thing that brought us well-being initially will cause us suffering in the end. The thing that caused us suffering initially will bring us well-being in the end, right? That if you take any tenant to an extreme, it will go in a circle. So I've been enjoying listening to Thich Nhat Hanh, right? And now, unlike Eckhart Tolle and Lazarus, Thich Nhat Hanh is more of a minimalist. You give your possessions up to join the Sangha. You aim to live a simple life, right? Because now you don't have to worry about all your possessions, right? So we're going to have more sustainable well-being by giving up your material possessions. Whereas that's a little different than Lazarus saying you can have it all, and Eckhart Tolle saying that some rich people are a lot more spiritual because they've already discovered that fame and money and whatever doesn't cure their suffering, right? Because poor people haven't had the opportunity to learn that the cult meme that material possessions create happiness and progress is a lie. Like if you've lived hand to mouth your whole life and you see images of rich people smiling with millions of dollars, and the cult says you too can take this course and become rich and successful like these people. Well, you don't have enough exposure to money to realize that there's plenty of things that are worse, right? If you have 5 houses, you've got to have maids, for 5 houses. You can't clean 5 houses yourself and just rush back and forth cleaning 5. And then some of the maids steal things from time to time or cancel at awkward moments, right? You are just getting ready to go to the Italian house, got on the plane, private jet and all, and the maid didn't show up and didn't even give 2 weeks notice. That wretch, she could have done that any time in the last 5 years. She was sitting there, empty house. Now she's just given notice the one time I need her. Turn the jet around, right? What are these people doing? Having lives, doing, oh my goodness, it's terrible, right? And you can't just have any maid, right? Because it's a fancy house and it has to be vetted for security. It's going to take weeks. So I can't even visit my own house. Oh my goodness, right? So someone on the street doesn't have these problems, right? Well, I'll take those problems, right? But the bottom line is someone with a lot of money understands that there are pressures, stresses, and lacks of freedom. If you have a bodyguard, you can't go out there on your own. Just give me a minute to meditate. No. We have to scout out the perimeter, right? And do this and do that. I don't have the freedom that I had when I had a few 100,000, right? So people who have got what the promise is, because every cult has a promise, and the materialistic cults, their promise is, if you work hard, do what you're told, and copy us, you will be rich, happy, have a house in the Hamptons, and you will live happily ever after. Right? That's the promise. So you go this thing, you do this, you do all this stuff you don't really want to do so that you can be happy. But once you have all that, and you realize you're not much happier, well, then you realize it was a lie, right? But the poor person who's never done that doesn't realize it's a lie. Right? They don't realize that if you're running a company with 1,000 employees, that means more than 50 problems a day that the average person doesn't know how to solve. And so even though they're riding in a Rolls Royce to their office, they're not enjoying the Rolls Royce the way you would with nothing on your mind. They're lost in, okay, how am I going to handle that one so I can handle that? Will I lose that? Will I be ousted as CEO? Will that come out in the press? If I fire this person who's such a pain in the neck, they're just terrible. If I fire them, will they go to the press about this? I hate them, but maybe I should reward them and do another NDA. Oh, Joe, get an NDA for that person and give them another 10,000. No, I've got to go now, right? They're not enjoying the Rolls Royce, right? They're busy solving 1,000 problems that you can't even imagine, right? Because you're not in that position, right? And so I'm not happier. I look around and I say, I thought I would be happy. I should be happy. I've got the Rolls Royce, I've got a driver, I've got this, but the traffic doesn't just disappear, right? Email and texts are coming in, this and that and the other. I've got to wake up at 3 a.m. to talk with Hong Kong, right? Because, well, we're serving money, right? And there's a deal to be had over there. There'll be an extra 100,000 if we wake up but now there's that sleep thing and blah, blah, blah. So Eckhart would say that sometimes successful people understand more than ordinary people. And of course, it's relative because what's ordinary today, right? Living in a 1,500 square foot house, having 2 Hondas, driving around at 70 miles an hour, having computers that are smarter than the most expensive computer 50 years ago, millions of dollars of computing power, being able to have food arrive from all around the world and pay less money per hour than at any point in human history for food. For some, that is vast wealth, right? See, because if you went back to the Middle Ages, to 500 years ago, and you said, how happy would you be? You're going to your farm on your horse, right? You're galloping along on your horse, right? You have to till the fields in the rain. You got to do this, got to do that. You say, how happy would you be if you had a wife and 2 kids, if you had 2 cars that went 70 miles an hour and you didn't have, sore muscles after riding even 10 miles, right? You had all the foods from all around the world, all fresh, and this thing in the refrigerator. You didn't have to haul ice from the market. You had a device that would tell you anything in the world. How many horseshoes were sold in Australia? Where's Australia? Well, you haven't found it yet, but you will in time. There's all these countries, by the way, that you haven't even discovered 500 years ago. This country and that country, and this has this food and this and that. And then you have this big box with news delivered and email. You didn't have to gallop to tell your brother to pay back the debt. You can just send a message, pay back the debt. They get it 1 second later for free. Would you be happy? Would you be happy, right? And this, I think, is an important observation. Would you be happy, you ask that farmer, driving along on his horse in the rain and hoping he's not going to get fever and horse is going to have to be put down and how's the field going to be plowed, right? Would you be happy in a 1,500 square foot house rather than a 100 square foot hut, right? In a 2 cars, this with insurance that if your car, like your horse dies, they'll bring you a new horse. How about that? You don't have to plow by hand. You just get a new horse. You just pay a little, you just scribble your name on this little check. Very easy. They would tell you, absolutely, I would be so happy. You have no idea how happy I would be. They say, well, you won't have much in your bank account. I don't have much in my bank account now. I don't have a bank account, right? And you'll be working 40 hours a week. That's nothing. I work 60 hours a week. Then I have to come home and chop wood and do this. And the children, little Elisa died last week. Are we going to be able to have enough kids still living to manage the farm? He will tell you unequivocally that living a lower class lifestyle, right, with some government benefits or whatever, is going to make him so happy. Thank you, God, for fulfilling all my dreams, right? And then we fast forward 500 years and we look at how happy is the average American in that exact condition. No money, few weeks of savings, able to pay bills, signing little things, 2 Hondas, 1,500 square feet, more clothes by a factor of 100 than, that little family had, Oh, this has a little tear in it, we'll throw this out, as opposed to let's mend that for 3 years and hand it down through the children, right? They would be convinced that they would be happy if they had a lower class, hand-to-mouth life, working only 40 hours a week, that they drove to in a car outside of the rain. But 70% of Americans don't like their job. And 70% of Americans are lonely. 90% of Americans are dissatisfied with themselves and their lives. Most marriages end in divorce. In other words, we're dissatisfied with our partners. Those are just the ones where people had the initiative to do something about their dissatisfaction. The dissatisfaction rate is much higher than the divorce rate, right? So annoying. Why do I have a husband that doesn't do his chores? Are you happy? No, I'm not happy. I have a husband who doesn't do his. My wife keeps doing this. No, I'm not happy in the slightest. I'm tremendously dissatisfied. I'm more dissatisfied than that farmer 500 years ago, right? So now this is, I think, important because we have new technology on the horizon, right? In the next 300 years, electricity costs will come to almost zero. Robots will be doing all the menial jobs. Flying cars, everything will be electrified. Smog will clear up, right? In cities, as electric cars come in. Robo-taxis mean unlimited parking. Local food will be grown in shipping containers with hydroponics, right? CRISPR, gene therapy, energy, this can be changed. You can have this, you can choose to have a boy, you can do this, right? There will be sex toys for the most wonderful orgasms imaginable. Just little buttons, right? Just press it on your phone. Program A, the 45-minute orgasm with the perfect, no one interrupted and got text, this, that, all this stuff. And the question is, will we be happy then? Well, of course. When we all have Teslas. When robots are doing the annoying thing. When we have a robot cleaning our house for us, right? For pennies. Reliable, right? None of this, I forgot to I forgot to take out the trash. I left the water running. And none of that. None of that. Precision, right? Precision robots. People that show up and get the job done, right? Robots, right? You don't have to pay, they don't need overtime. 24/7 working, right? Night vision, right? You can have them out mowing the electric mowers at midnight, silently, navigating off of GPS. Why do it in the day when we have to look at them, right? Why not have night workers, right? We'll all be in luxury, even more varieties of food. The question is, if the farmer statistically 500 years ago, said he would be happy if he had all that we have, and is in fact less happy, more anxious, more stressed, less physical in shape, right? And if we do the same trick in 300 years, because time is speeding up, and probably the world will change more in the next 300 years than it did in the last 500. So in 300 years, will we be happy when all we have to do is blink our eyes and visualize food and a robot brings it into the bedroom? Of course I would be happy. No. We will be no more happier than the average person is today, 300 years from now, than we were 500 years ago, with all the changes we've had. Now we reminisce, like, wouldn't it be nice to arrive on horseback, right? To be out in nature, pristine, no traffic, no gangs, this and that, just arrive at the farm. Arrive at the farm on horseback. No noisy gadgets, actually able to talk to the family, right? They're not looking at their cell phones. Well, statistically speaking, right? It's not clear that we are any happier, any more satisfied, like ourselves anymore today than we did 500 years ago. It's not clear that our shame has gone down overall. I mean, it's clear that there are many things that we would have been ashamed of. Sex out of wedlock, right? Very shameful, right? Now, not so much. But has shame itself reduced? Oh, I feel so ashamed. I clicked send when I hadn't edited the tweet. Oh, my goodness, right? The amount of shame hasn't gone down. It may even have gone up. Even though we're able to do more things without shame, the amount of net shame may be higher, maybe lower, maybe about the same, right? But we are not happier, right? I am not happier than this statistical farmer 500 years ago, right? And there's very little I could ask for in terms of more outer luxury. I have all the time in the world to make videos like this and explore ideas. Studio all to myself, right? But in the background is pain. In the background is suffering, stress, fears of pain, shame, right? And all that therapy and all of those meditations and all of those workshops and all of those experiences and all of that money hasn't reduced much of that pain, right? And so the question is, 300 years from now, with all of that technology, would that do it? And here's where I think Thich Nhat Hanh, in particular, has a really powerful insight, which is that to be completely present in the moment and connect to ourself is the way of transcending suffering. To transcend language, to transcend identity and belief, the imprisonment of the ego. Transcend that and be present to something that is beyond words, to be present to self. And to connect with that through the breath, that this is a path for the farmer, for the wealthiest person on the planet, for the person who's now 1,000 times wealthier than that farmer, living hand to mouth with two Hondas, with a concrete driveway with an opening garage door. I mean, can you imagine selling an opening garage door back in the 1500s? Just press a button and a whole room that just sits there empty waiting for you to drive home in your electric horse just opens up so you can get out and there's no rain. Oh, I would be so happy if I had that. It's completely tuned out, right? By 99% of the population that don't think a moment about that. And instead say, why do we live in this dump? It's only 1,500 square feet. Look at the neighbors. They've got 3,000 square feet and a triple car garage. And they don't have Hondas. They've got Model X, right? That's would make me happy, right? So I do think there's a lot in questioning. If I have to do this and this and this, have this and this and this, in this and this and this way, from these particular people, in order to be happy, I'm going to be unhappy most of the time, because most of the time the world is not going to follow my script, even though Lazarus is very big on creating your own reality with scripts, right? That you write it all, you create the scripts. So you need to just go in and change the script, and then reality will follow your script, right? That's what Lazarus says. I don't know of any people, having spent time in that community, that do this reliably or are particularly happier than the average person. Then you have the other choice, which is to choose happiness, right? I choose to be happy now, here and now. I choose to check in with the present moment and to connect with myself and to connect with life and to connect with energy and to be happy now. If I have an unreliable car, be happy that I have a car at all, instead of a horse that might catch pneumonia going to the fields in the rain, right? That if I have 1,000 square feet of house, be happy it's not 100, which much more common, 200 square feet might sleep 6, 7, 8 people, 500 years ago. Still does in parts of the world, on the floor, right? We actually have our own bedroom. The couple has its own bedroom, right? Supposedly to have sex, but now to argue in private, right? So they can argue separate from their children. And we can just choose to be happy now, right? Here we are, right? Whatever's going on, right? Just be happy here, right? And I think there's a tremendous power in that, right? The power to choose to be happy, to connect with self through breath, right? But I feel miserable. So you make choices that allow us to connect more with the self in the present, right? If I will breathe for 15 minutes, I am here now. Gestures can be helpful because it's so easy to drift out of the present. And if there's a sensation, it serves as a greater anchor, right? The present, to be here now, is beautiful. There's great, tremendous happiness, right? I don't need anything. Got to get this and that. Right? So we have that direction to choose happiness. I choose to be happy with what is. I need to do all of this thing so that I can be happy. And the truth is in the middle, right? It's harder to choose to be happy when you're on the street being shouted at with a cold, having caught a staph infection from treating your pneumonia at the nearest ER. It's harder to choose. You can, right? You have the more radical expressions of choosing that with a Byron Katie. You know, someone puts a gun to her head and says, "I'm going to kill you if you don't do this," and Byron can choose to be present and say, "Oh well, right? I'm not going to try and manipulate, negotiate, make my way to the phone and call the police. I'm not going to try and be happy by making my life last longer. I'll be happy by choosing to be happy and letting go and accepting what is. I have a person with a gun to their head that seems upset about things. That's what is, right? I don't need to create a whole story about this, and I'm still here in the present. So I began this video with an awareness, which is that I escaped into my head as a way of managing childhood trauma. Terror, anxiety in my body waiting to be hit, feeling out of control, feeling helpless, was so difficult that I escaped into my head. I dissociated from a lot of that trauma and I escaped into my head. And spending a lot of time in my head, away from that trauma, dissociating from that trauma. Well, I was initially enamored with all that thoughts and strategies could do. I could develop this model of reality and this strategy of reality. And it would help me predict when I might get hurt. So I could avoid the hurt by seeing patterns, right? 12 cans of beer, redness of the eyes, aha, aha, right? I see the link. I see the link. I need to get out of this situation that has 12 cans of beer and red eyes. Now, if I ask Dad or Mom, are you going to hit me? It doesn't matter what they say. That's not a useful pattern, right? I have to count the cans and I have to look at the facial expression. And then my body will let me know, get out of here now, right? And that's a useful pattern. I figured it out, right? I don't have to listen to all their bullshit. I don't have to be told how my parents love me and are doing the best they can and how lucky. I don't have to listen to any of those lies. I just have to watch the cans, watch the face, and exit. I have to get myself into a dissociative distance from these people, these giants that can kill me if they feel like it. Right? I've got to get out of that situation. So what a brilliant thing to be able to anticipate this and then to learn manipulation, right? These people are afraid of this. You have to figure out what they're afraid of. And then, even though they are sociopathic, meaning if you say, I'm really scared of what you're doing here, they won't stop because sociopaths are more concerned with themselves than you. So they're not going to listen to me and my terror, my fear of being hit, my fear of being shamed. But they are afraid of things. And so if I can link what they are afraid of with the behavior I want them to do to protect me, now I can manipulate them so that I will be safer, so that my siblings will be safer. I can learn the code of fear to manipulate giants from hurting me less and rewarding me more, right? And all of that is mental activity, pattern analysis, right? And it's coming out of fear, and it's works, right? I predicted this. Now they're not doing that to me as much. Now they're not doing this. So this wonderful world of dissociative mental analysis, right? And so what we usually do with any system of reality, right? With any system of reality is we keep leaning on it, right? Thoughts were my savior. Fear was my savior. It helped me survive. And so paying more and more attention to fear, paying more and more attention to thoughts allowed my outer reality to get more and more efficient, more and more safe, avoid risks, like do this, do that. So we have a success of a certain form, right? So we keep going, right? Well, there is a time when every single strategy in its extreme or in some given context moves from asset to liability. Well, the very thing that allowed me to escape and to manage became a more and more complex control house in there. Let's remember the data points for this person. Let's remember the data points for that person. I have to do this and do this. And now, I should be doing this when I interact with this person. I should be doing that when I interact with that other person. To avoid this threat, I should be doing like that. I should be doing like that in order to manage this concern over here. My body's giving me signals over here. And I've got this whole physiological map that's telling me how to be safe in all of these different environments. And often they're at odds. If I do that, that's good for that pattern, but it's bad for that pattern. What do I do, right? And none of the patterns were transcendent in the sense that, manipulating this person here, writing a contract there, doing this, avoiding being hurt here. That's not fun. I mean, it's more fun than being terrorized and beaten, but it's not fun to have to worry and figure out what's the most scary thing at any moment. That's not joyful, right? It's exhausting. It's tiring. So chronic fatigue, right? So the very thing that, kept me alive as an infant is now giving me chronic fatigue. And that articulation, that talent of navigating different ideas and seeing how they can be put together in different patterns allows me to be highly articulate. Now, I'm in a culture that bows down to articulating talent. And so even though I was anxious, exhausted, and miserable, I would have people tell me how brilliant I was. You're so brilliant. You're so articulate. Oh, you're so smart. Well, remember the underlying goal of every human being: to feel sustainably better, to avoid feeling chronically worse. I would look in and I would say that I'm more stressed, I'm more tired, I'm more exhausted, I'm more frenetic in all these pattern analyzing than most people. And I'm being admired for it. And what that tells me is that these people are still under the delusion that if they were really articulate and really smart, that they would be happy and successful, and that if they were successful, then they would be happy. But I know it's not true. Because no matter how successful I am, I'm not happy. And no matter how smart I am, I'm not happy. And no matter how articulate I am, I'm not happy. And so it's another cult lie, right? If you have lots of money, you'll be happy. I have enough and I'm not. If you're smart, you'll be happy. I have enough and you're not. If you're good looking, you'll have lots of sex and this and that, and you'll be happy. And I'm not, right? So then where does it go, right? Because if you get good at manipulating the outer reality, then you can have the outer reality do largely what you want. But if it's done out of fear and with lots of mapping out and worries about this, and if there's physiological trauma in the body, right? Then I'm a traumatized person in a perfect reality, right? And so, that's my interest in Eckhart Tolle and Thich Nhat Hanh, is they're the opposite, right? So I created all of this with pattern analysis, and they're creating all this by presence and letting go. And, that when I was younger would have been terrifying. Just let go and be beaten, right? Just choose to be happy while I'm no, that's just too much, right? And so you do your letting go and you do your present thing and no thought and transcend and be in the now. I'm worried about the future and this and that and the other, and I'm doing a good job of avoiding this and this and this and this because I'm thinking, right? And so but when my outer reality is in a pretty good condition, which it is at the moment, and I'm still exhausted and frightened and nervous, it's unreasonable to think that getting it in better condition is going to resolve that. So connecting with presence and choosing self, right? So here's where we get to this interesting thought, right? So I developed the ability to analyze patterns and abstractions and develop the mind. I developed that ability to keep me safe to serve, right? To create more sustainable well-being. And having done that more than most people, and being more anxious, more terrified, more nervous than probably most people, 60% or so of my life has been lived in fear and anxiety of all kinds of things that could go wrong in the future, and desperately and exhaustingly seeing that it doesn't go that way. 60% of my life is and has been hell, right? Living those fears in my mind. That could happen. Oh, God, that would feel so terrible. What do I have to do in this and that, right? Now, the outer result of that is quite nice, right? Lots of things that could go wrong don't. I have backup plans for my backup plans in many cases. And they come in handy, right? So the outer life is quite nice. But I'm more tired than I was with that before all this plan and success. I'm more anxious. I'm more irritable, right? So that's not going to work, right? So when people tell me how smart I am, the intelligent analysis is that smartness of this kind doesn't matter, right? They perhaps are admiring it because they think that being really smart is important, that being able to analyze patterns is important to their well-being, or that it's just a blanket cult virtue, right? Be smart, be intelligent. I want a handsome, intelligent, rich, powerful person. That's the ideal. So then you've got some of those elements, right? But the ideal is not based on data, right? No one is asking these smart, intelligent, handsome, successful people how happy they are and getting a straight answer and then saying maybe we should change the cult ideal. It's just a brainwashed ideal. But I would say that, at the end of my smartness is being smart enough to know that being smart doesn't matter. Like the kind of smart that Thich Nhat Hanh has with his simplicity and presence is more successful at creating happiness than the kind of smartness that I have, right? And people aren't telling Thich Nhat Hanh all the time how smart he is. They're telling, when he was still alive, they're telling me how compassionate and what a lovely, innocent presence he has. Right? So in other words, the cult has got it wrong again. Having lots of money isn't going to do it. Being really smart isn't going to do it. Having lots of sex or being beautiful or handsome isn't going to do it. The cult has got it wrong. having high rank in the cult is often correlated with more misery. You want to be president of the United States? Join the misery club. 18 hours a day of fear and anxiety and absolute misery, right? Go ahead, right? You know, and only a few people, like a Barack Obama or a Clinton or whatever, that meets all the check marks. Charismatic, only they know that being a cult icon is not what it's cracked up to be. Everyone else thinks, if I could only be more like that. But it is a lie, right? Meanwhile, being a monk, doing walking, that's not part of the cult icon, right? That seems a little bit giving up, not good enough. You couldn't make it in the hard-nosed world of business, so you walked around in circle ringing a bell, right? But the amount of presence, the amount of joy, the amount of beauty, goodness, laughter, healing that goes on around a Thich Nhat Hanh, or to some extent around an Eckhart Tolle or a Byron Katie, is higher, right? Byron Katie is bringing so much more light into the world with her approach than I am with my approach of thinking things through, right? So I'm interested. So I think, to kind of complete this theme, the most wealthy person in the world is wealthy enough to understand that money cannot buy happiness. The smartest person in the world is smart enough to know that being smart doesn't create happiness. In other words, if you're the most powerful person, the most beautiful person, the most sexual person, the richest person, the most famous person, the smartest person, the most powerful person, whatever those things are that the cult puts out as the ideal, they all lead to transcendence if you follow them honestly. If you have enough sex, you realize that sex isn't what you're looking for. If you have enough money, you realize that money isn't what you're looking for. If you have enough fame, you realize that fame doesn't do it, right? But nobody else realizes that. They're still believing the cult lie, right? But I think any of these things in extremes tends to be that, right? I also think to some extent, I haven't done this, so I haven't fully transcended it. But I think that to some extent, right, if you're just focusing entirely on acceptance and presence and choosing to be happy, that doesn't do it either. If you don't have things that you enjoy and want and prefer, right? So I think that the sweet spot is in the middle, right? If you enjoy strawberry ice cream, go get some. That's materialism. If you enjoy sex, go get some, right? That's hedonism and, stimulation. If you enjoy companionship and talking, get some. If you want to avoid trauma and mitigate the worst things and move to a better neighborhood, do it. Bow down to fear and say, I don't want to live in fear. I'm going to move to another neighborhood, right? If you want to learn more knowledge and understand things, get an education, right? If you want to wear nicer clothes, do so, right? Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie don't dress shabby. If you want to be here now, do so. If you want to meditate and release the anxiety, do so, right? I think the sweet spot is in the middle. And any of these extremes, if you want to create more of your own reality in some way, and you can figure out how to do that, right? If you can visualize success and manifest it, do it, right? If you can have a gratitude diary and feel better, do it, right? My observation is that all of these things collapse in their singularity and in their extreme. Now, the exception of that are generally the main teachers, right? Eckhart Tolle just flies around the world being here now and gets paid lots of money for it, right? But if most people were to just be there now and not go to work and just meditate and ring a bell and talk out, they would get fired and it would cause more problems than benefits, right? But for Eckhart Tolle, and he was willing to live out in a park bench if necessary and didn't have a family and kids to raise, I mean, that's a good, that's commitment. But it's also, Byron Katie learned about letting go of the meanings of things. And that works to some extent. It didn't work very well for me around shame and sexual abuse, right? Being sexually abused and saying they shouldn't sexually abuse me, and then saying they should sexually abuse me, right? Or I should abuse myself. Doing all those flips around that Byron Katie did, it didn't feel particularly healthy in that extreme, right? But letting go of some of the other things, right? My wife should put the toothpaste on. My wife shouldn't put the toothpaste on, right? And that may be a good application for that. Or get it together and put the toothpaste on and be more attentive. And your life will get better because you're attentive. My life will get better because I will see your attentiveness and feel more respected. So do it, right? Grow up, do it, right? And that also works, by the way, right? My employees will kind of drift off into laziness on kind of a downward curve until I stop them, right? They don't have a self thing, right? I can fire them, but otherwise it's a penalty. Like that's going to cost you $50 if you don't start managing the safety equipment or do this, right? Oh, $50. Well, we, have to do something, right? It's not I should enjoy my employees damaging their health and running up medical bills. They should be doing that. No, they shouldn't be doing that, right? So none of these things work very well in extremes. Materialism becomes less and less important the more you have. Money, sex, whatever. If you're very famous and everyone wants to be near you, suddenly it doesn't mean anything. Nobody knows about you and you desperately want to be seen, then you can dream about being famous. As soon as you're famous and everyone wants to see you, then it's an irritant, right? Because, now they want to see me. Won't anyone give me some peace? And it has no value because you've got a lot of it, right? And also, if you're looking for sustenance of your image of suffering, well, you've got to find a new reason to suffer if that's your habit or whatever it is, right? So, anything pursued to its end, right? If you truly let go of everything and then realize that, your greatest joy is a cup of hot chocolate offered to you from time to time because you don't have a job because you're just living in surrender, and sometimes somebody offers you that, you realize materialism is good. I like dry clothes in the laundry machine. This is great, right? But it's not enough, right? As soon as you're living in a house with your own laundry, etc., now it's, I've got to put the thing in the dryer. Now it's making, those jackets going around, ding, 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 ding. I hate that sound. I've got to turn off that dryer. I don't want to hear that clicking noise, right? Why does the dryer have to go on right when I'm trying to have a phone call, right? So it immediately becomes a problem, right? thinking. If only I could think through those ideas. Yeah, then you have a restless mind who's always thinking through ideas and this and that, but that doesn't necessarily bring happiness. So if we fly on a plane, we have a circular globe. Reality tends to be circular. If you fly east, you will ultimately be flying west if you don't change course. It's the problem with extremism in anything, right? Whatever you do in the extreme, giving up material things, you give up too many, you die, right? Pursuing too many things, you certainly don't enjoy life, right? But there is a middle way with all of these things, and I enjoy listening to smart, people I admire. I should just say people I admire, people that know how to do things that I don't know how to do. And seeing the gifts of that, right? And understanding, like right now I'm focusing on presence and breath and transcending thought, having taken thought about as far as I can go.